started. It's 6 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and get started. I'd just like to welcome everyone to come on over if they're here for a presentation. Hi everyone, thank you for being here. My name is Kate McGuire. I'm the interim superintendent for Anoka-Hennepin schools for this school year. And I'd like to welcome you here to our community meeting this evening. And I'd like you to know who's in the room so you have a sense for who's in the room. We've got several board members here. As you know, this process is being conducted as part of the school board's designed process for getting feedback and delivering proposals to community members. So we have several school board members here this evening, and I'd like to introduce them. Marcy Anderson is our school board chairperson. Nicole Hayes is next to her. Casey DeShane is right here next to Nicole. And I believe those are three of our school board members who are here this evening. I'd also like you to know that in the room, partly to answer questions and be responsive tonight, is we have a group of principals in the back who will be around to answer questions after the presentation. We also have district office staff members here. We have folks from transportation, information systems, research and evaluation, technology, operations. So our hope is to be responsive to questions that you might have when we're finished with the presentation. So I'm going to begin just by giving some introductory information, and then I'll introduce Dr. Mary Wolverton, Associate Superintendent for Elementary Schools, and Greg Cole, Chief Operations Officer, who will provide some details on the proposals and how community members can provide feedback to us. And like every good teacher, I'm going to begin with the end in mind, and that is why we're here tonight. We need to make some attendance area boundary adjustments at the elementary level throughout the district and at the middle school level in the Blaine High School cluster. I want to be clear that we are not proposing any high school boundary changes at this time or in this process. In Anoka-Hennepin, generally, you may know that schools in long-established neighborhoods have fewer students, while schools in rapidly growing areas have more. Most of our schools are clustered in these older neighborhoods in the southern two-thirds of the district. Few schools are located in the northern third, which is now the fastest growing area of the district, specifically in Blaine and Ramsey. The student population at some of our schools is declining, while the student population at other schools is exploding. The growth in some of our communities is both exciting and challenging because we have to ensure that there's a similar educational experience at every single one of our schools. And when schools are overcrowded, teaching and learning and programs are impacted at those schools. And I've been sharing some examples of what that looks like, what happens to curriculum and instruction and practices inside a school building when it's overcrowded. So for example, one of our schools is crowded to the extent that the school cannot use its media center in the way that it is intended to be used, because it's been divided in half for classroom space. One of our elementary schools is so crowded that they don't have a classroom for every teacher, so we have teachers moving from space to space on rolling carts. Some of our schools may not have enough space to meet with small groups of students to provide intervention support or academic acceleration. Those academic supports may be being provided in hallways or atriums. Restrooms, lunchrooms, and other common areas may be crowded in some schools. Sometimes programming is impacted even more significantly. For example, at Sunrise Elementary, some of our kindergarten students are actually receiving their educational experience at Johnsville Elementary School this year. As a result, attendance boundary changes will be needed at the elementary level and at two Blaine cluster middle level schools to balance enrollment across the district. So tonight, you'll hear some information about our process, our timeline, plans for transitioning students and families, parameters that informed our thinking regarding the proposals that we've prepared. You'll hear some information about community feedback and what has further informed our thinking about whether or not we revised proposals. And you probably already know we have a revised proposal tonight based partly on community feedback. And we'll talk more about feedback opportunities that parents and guardians still have and community members regarding our process and decision making. In order to help you feel well informed, once we're done sharing information, you'll have an opportunity to ask questions. Staff members will be stationed around this room and over by the maps to answer any questions that you might have and assist you with providing feedback if you wish to do so. Lastly, for my part anyway, I want you to know that I appreciate that you're here tonight to get facts and learn more information. I've said this many times throughout the last month or so as I've talked with community members. We know from personal communication and from our surveys regarding students and families that our families and students love their schools, which is why making moves around boundaries are so challenging. Yet, of course, it's an essential thing that school districts must consider occasionally. You'll hear information tonight about the work that we do to ensure a similar educational experience at each of our school buildings. And with that, I'm going to introduce Dr. Mary Wolverton, Associate Superintendent for Elementary Schools, who will provide the next set of information to you.
Thank you, Dr. McGuire. As you can see on this slide, within our boundary updates, the boundary process is aligned to a strategic priority. And through this strategic priority of reviewing our boundaries, specifically at the elementary level, it provides for us the opportunity to look at how we can optimize our facilities and ensure equitable programming for all of our students in the elementary schools. In the next few slides, what we're going to talk a little bit about or share information about is our timeline within this process. The new attendance boundaries that would be approved will be implemented in the fall of 2023 for our next school year. The school board, as Dr. McGuire has noted, is seeking community input and feedback as we are going through this process. And as many of you may already know, we have community meetings that we are holding in every one of our area clusters, as well as getting input and feedback from our community. This provides a quick glance at the timeline with the process that we are engaging the community in. We started this boundary process in the month of September, and we held community meetings at each one of our clusters in the district. When we refer to clusters, we're talking about, we refer to those as schools that are in the attendance area of the area high schools. So this cluster is referred to as the Champlin Park cluster, as it is aligned with Champlin Park High School. So we started our first series of community meetings in September. And now in the month of October, we are engaging in our second round of community meetings, where you can see on the slide the yellow arrow where it shows we are currently at. On November 7th, at our first school board meeting in November, the district team will go forward to the school board with our first round, our first proposal of recommendations based on input and feedback from our community members. Then at the November 21st school board meeting, a final decision will be made in relation to boundaries for the 2023-24 school year. Then as we look at the month of December, at that time, any families that may have new attendance areas for their students for the fall of 2023 will receive notification from the district that your attendance area has shifted from one school to a different school. So families will be informed in the month of December. And then as noted, that boundary process, that new enrollment will go into place the fall of 2023. So as that decision is made, one of the things our team will work comprehensively on is how do we support students and families that may have any transitions and how we support them with that. So for any students where they may have a new school of attendance for the fall of 2023, if a family elects to consider an in-district transfer to have their child stay at their current elementary school, we begin our first series of in-district transfer options in December. And so families could elect to complete an application and a request for an in-district transfer for their student to remain at their existing elementary school. As we engage in that process, we will prioritize students in that process who are current fourth graders and prioritize that if a family is wanting their child to stay in their existing school through an in-district transfer for fifth grade, those students would be prioritized, as well as any younger siblings if a family is including them in that request. We will also look at prioritizing for families that requested current third grade students for the fall of 2023 who would be fourth graders. Throughout that process, as we go through the in-district transfer process for families who complete that application, we will prioritize, as noted, current fourth graders or current third graders based on our facility capacity and class size ratios. And with our in-district transfer process, transportation is the responsibility of families. The other thing that our school district does, specifically within any time we do a boundary adjustment, our team of principals within that area collaborate with each other in relation to how do we as a team support our students and families with those transitions. So an example would be the group of principals back here in the Champlin Park cluster. What we would start doing in the month of December is collaborating as a team on how we can support any students that may be shifting to a new school for the fall of 2023, and also collaborating and working with parents and guardians, supporting them as well within that transition process. As we go through the boundary process in our district, we have several parameters that I'll review in the next few slides that really guide our process and guide our decision making and our recommendations. So one of the things that we do look at in this process is the teacher-student ratio established by the school board through the budget process, which determines if we have adequate space within a school facility in relation to those ratios. At the elementary level, we put a high priority on our primary grades, kindergarten, first grade, and then also, when possible, also second grade and third grade. The other variable that we look at is we strive to ensure that educational supports and programming is also based on our decision making on how we can support our students in their educational programming. Within our parameters, one of the things that we also look at are these three variables that we keep in mind as we are looking at our proposals. That we ensure all students have the opportunity to receive comparable educational experiences. One of the great strengths in our educational programming at the elementary level, K-5, is that every one of our elementary schools has the same curriculum, instructional, and assessment programming in every one of our schools at each one of our grade levels. The other piece, another parameter, is that we follow state guidelines in relation to any recommendations for boundary adjustments. and that we also consider how we can use our district resources efficiently with any current boundary process that we have and any recommendations moving forward. Another parameter that we look at is that bus rides are of reasonable lengths, and that we facilitate, when possible, facilitate walking to school for students living within a mile of their school. The exception of that, with that is if the transportation department also considers that and makes adjustments providing transportation in relation to if there are hazardous roads that we would not want to have students walking across. The other variable that you'll see even tonight as we're reviewing the new proposals also is we look at providing contiguous boundaries when possible within our boundary adjustments. As Dr. McGuire noted earlier, in the proposals that we are bringing forward, there are no recommendations in our district to change any boundaries for the high school attendance areas. There are no adjustments with that. The other variable that specifically in this cluster, and Dr. McGuire noted it also, is we also factor in potential growth within attendance areas. And Greg Cole, our Chief Operations Officer, will talk about that a little bit in the next few slides. And that in our district, we strive to maintain boundaries at the elementary level for 5 years and at the secondary level for 10 years. The boundary process we are engaging the community in now is a 1-year acceleration in that 5-year commitment, and that is in alignment to what we are experiencing, as we talked about a little bit earlier in the presentation, on some expanded growth in enrollment that we are seeing in several communities within the Anoka-Hennepin School District. At this time, I'd like to introduce Greg Cole, our Chief Operations Officer, who will provide updates on our next steps with our boundary proposals.
Thank you, Dr. Wolverton. I just first want to say thank you to all of you who have come this evening and those of you who are joining us online. I can't tell you how important it is for us to receive feedback and get input from families and community members that we serve. I think that one piece that's important for you all to know, when the team members were introduced to you, we try to create a very diverse team of district folks to look at these types of things from multiple lenses. But part of the really important part of this is the feedback that we get from families, because that's the one lens that we can't necessarily see things from is from your lens as you try to navigate these, particularly if you're impacted by them. So we take this very seriously. For anybody who has to move, particularly as Dr. McGuire said, if you love your school, you don't want to leave it. So I just want to reiterate how seriously we take this and how important it is for you to give feedback. As you'll note as I go through some of these maps, that our first proposal, which went to the school board on September 26th, you can disregard that now. There have been some adjustments that we have made to that based on that feedback that we received. And when we get the feedback, I think it's important, I'll try to repeat this several times, that we balance that feedback with the parameters that we use for our decision making. And that's how we try to come up with our decisions, because ultimately we are faced with changing the boundaries because of some of the pressures that we're seeing in parts of our district. So I'm just going to kind of review some maps with you to give you to get your bearings on this a little bit. What you're looking at now is the current Dayton-Oxbow Creek boundary that exists today, prior to any kind of recommendations. And as you can see, the Dayton boundary geographically is quite large, and it has been quite large for some time because that worked. There's a lot of rural land out there, farmland out in that area, and so the Dayton Elementary School has served that area quite well. As many of you know, that's been changing. And so as a result of that and some other factors, that's one reason we have to examine this. And then also you're looking at the Oxbow Creek current boundary, which is in orange. So I just kind of want to give you those two things. The other thing that I just want to be sure people know is we do have 26 elementary schools in the Anoka-Hennepin School District, and we try to break things up by clusters. So, and those clusters are kind of tied to the high schools. So in this particular case, of those 26, 5 elementary schools are pathways to Jackson Middle School and Champlin Park High School. So that's referred to as the Champlin Park cluster. So we'll talk about these 5 elementaries. And then what you're looking at here is just a little bit different map, and this is the current boundaries for Champlin Brooklyn Park Academy, which is in red-orange, and you can see there's a big split here to the northwest and the southeast, okay? And Champlin Brooklyn Park Academy actually sits within Oxbow Creek's boundary, okay? And in green, you'll see Oxbow Creek's boundary. So just kind of going back in time, you may wonder, well, why in the world did we do that to begin with? That doesn't seem to make a lot of sense, right? We have some challenges throughout the district, but there's 2 pockets in this district that are a challenge. We have 2 elementary schools here that are very close to each other. That's how the construction went at the time. Champlin Brooklyn Park Academy to the northeast and Oxbow Creek to the southwest are literally a block apart. As you'll see later, Evergreen Park Elementary School and Monroe Elementary School are 6 blocks apart. So it does pose some challenges when you think about the parameters earlier with regard to contiguous boundaries. We want boundaries to look logical to the eye and touch, but also we've had some cases, this being one, where we'll have students who literally are looking out their backyard at an elementary school, but that's not the one they attend. So those are things, some of the parameters that we've tried to make adjustments for. So that's the current Champlin Brooklyn Park Academy boundary and Oxbow boundary. So let's look at, okay. So what you see here is our most recent proposal with regard to 3 schools, Oxbow Creek in orange, Champlin Brooklyn Park Academy in green, and Dayton in blue. And essentially what you'll see is Dayton's boundary is essentially our proposal is the same as our original one. And what we're attempting to do here is shrink that boundary, okay? There's significant growth happening north and south of this line, which is 117th Avenue in Dayton. So essentially what we're looking at is adding to Oxbow Creek's attendance area, and we'll drop it in another place, but we're adding to that to capture some of the far western parts of Dayton where we're seeing some growth, but also some parts of Champlin over time that actually have a shorter drive to Oxbow Creek than they would to Dayton Elementary School. So drive times are a part of that as well. In green now we've made this boundary a little more contiguous with regard to Champlin Brooklyn Park Academy, where you actually have an area here which used to attend Oxbow, or currently attends Oxbow, now would make that more of a neighborhood school, and you would allow for people to be able to walk to school in that particular case. And then that boundary drops down to partly where it used to be. So if you'll see most of Oxbow on this part, minus this kind of triangle in the middle that would serve Champlin Brooklyn Park Academy, has remained somewhat close to constant as to what it is today on the far eastern side. And what you're looking at now is the current Monroe Elementary School and Evergreen Elementary School boundaries. This is the way they exist today. And as you can see, well, I'll show you in the next map what changes for mainly Monroe's attendance area. So there's kind of a nice juxtaposition here of current versus proposed. I think some key areas to note is in the area marked with the number 1, which is north of Highway 610 and south of 97th Avenue, this area here. The proposal would be to change that from Champlin Park Academy to Monroe. So these areas are currently served by Champlin Park Academy. Number 2, this area, which is on the north of 87th and south of Highway 610, and then east of 252, that area also would move to Monroe Elementary School. And then with regard to Evergreen Park's boundary, the Area 3, there would just be some slight changes there. Currently, what has been in existence for some time is a sort of a crooked line that was drawn a long time ago, which really doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and it doesn't impact, it impacts a very low number of students in this particular case. So that line is just getting cleaned up to make it more logical as a boundary, which is following 2 different roads. So just to kind of look at it again from a larger view here, these are the 2 new proposals as of today that we are putting forward. On the left, you'll see the proposal which shows Dayton, Champlin Park Academy, and Oxbow Creek. And then to the right, it does include Champlin Park Academy, but also Monroe and Evergreen. If you notice, Evergreen's attendance area, we are proposing very minimal changes to. And the rationale behind that at this time is that we look at a number of different data points, but one of them, we try to keep track of who might be coming into Anoka-Hennepin from other school districts around us, and then also who may be leaving Anoka-Hennepin for a variety of different reasons. And one of the things we noticed is the highest percentage of students going to other places, which are mainly nearby, are leaving out of Evergreen Park's attendance area. We do get a lot of students actually who come into that area as well, but that's a concern of ours, and that's something that we want to look deeper into and see if there are some other strategies that we could be using to keep those students in that particular attendance area. So we continue to receive feedback. As Dr. Wolverton mentioned, we'll be presenting a final proposal to the school board on November 7th. Their final approval would occur on November 21st. So the feedback loop has not stopped. This is our best information as we know today and our best proposal, but we're still waiting for feedback. As you can see, we have responded with some adjustments, and so I just want to be clear, this is today's current proposal. There will continue to be online forms available for you to provide us with feedback. As you can see, an email address, boundaries@ahschools.us, where you can let us know how you feel. And just to review some kind of trending topics from the feedback that we've received in a number of different forms so far, neighborhood changes, and kind of what that means is sometimes that has to do with logistical things that people want to be sure that we're considering, like my son or daughter might have to walk down a busy road or across a busy road. Did you consider that? We see a potential boundary that might be a lot more logical than the one you've drawn. So those are the types of things that refers to, and we evaluate all of these again with the parameters that were described before. We've had people just want to review maps because maybe they're really close to the line and they're not sure where their home may sit on that particular line. In-district transfer and open enrollment policies, just a lot of questions about, well, what might my options be? You know, if I don't want to change, is there any potential option for me to stay? I just need to know what those options are for our family. Or I have multiple children in this school, so I want to kind of know what the impact of this may be. And then special education services that we provide. A lot of times we have certain circumstances where a family's child may go to a different elementary school in their attendance area because of the services that are unique, that are provided in a different spot. So those are just some of the most common types of feedback that we've received so far. So final reminders are places for you to provide feedback. our website, ageschools.us/boundaries. There's a survey there. And then, as I mentioned, the email address before, that's another opportunity. And then finally, we're going to be here for a while to talk with you. We have staff from transportation, information systems, we have principals in the back, school board members, district staff. All of us are here to answer individual questions that you have, so we welcome you to stick around if you'd like to talk to us. But thank you. We look forward to continuing to try to figure this out, and we appreciate your participation tonight. Have a good night.